Welcome to Amidst the Chaos, the podcast where we dare to find God in the middle of real life, not just the highlight reel. I'm your host, Amber Gallion, and around here we build on one foundation only, Jesus. In each episode, I'll share my journey with God, wins, wounds, questions and all, and how He brings order, clarity, and peace into the chaos of everyday life. So take a breath, bring whatever you're carrying today, and let's lean into the one who never changes, even when everything else does. Hey friend, welcome back to Amidst the Chaos. I'm Amber and I'm really glad you're here. Thank you for pressing play, for giving me a slice of your time and attention today. If you're new here, feel free to follow or subscribe and make sure you hit the notification bell or button so you get a notification when a new episode airs and you don't miss it. Alright, let's dive in. I want to start today with a statement that has shaped the way I look at my life. The enemy can't steal your calling, he can only steal your time. Your calling, the thing God uniquely designed for you, is anchored in heaven. It's written in His book long before you ever took a breath. That doesn't change. I'm thinking of Psalms chapter 139, verse 16 here, where it talks about all the days ordained for you being written in His book before one of them came to be. But what can change is how long it takes for you to actually walk in that calling. And I've learned that the enemy is very strategic. He loves to use fear, comfort, distraction, and logical choices to push us onto the side roads. Not to destroy the plan of God, because that's impossible, but to delay it, to exhaust us, to confuse us, so we arrive much later than necessary. If you look at Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 2 and 3, there is this confronting little detail. The journey from Horeb to the edge of the promised land was about 11 days, and yet Israel ended up wandering for 40 years. The promise didn't disappear, but the timeline got stretched in a painful way. And I want to take you back to a moment where that became painfully clear in my own life. When I was 20, I had this really strong desire to go to Argentina as an au pair. It wasn't just a random idea, it felt like an adventure, like growth, like stepping into something bigger than the safe little world I knew. I already spoke Spanish, so for me it was this opportunity to really put the language into practice, to immerse myself in the culture, to live it. And at that time, I wasn't a Christian yet. I would have called myself agnostic. I didn't have language for calling or God's plan for my life. I just knew something in me was drawn to that path. But then there was this other option, the safe option. Instead of taking the leap and going to Argentina, I took a stable administrative job at a gym, at a sports club, a different one from previous episodes. It had a steady income, familiar environment, no big risks. No one around me was really cheering me on to do the wild thing and move to Argentina. The narrative was more like, be realistic, you can always travel later. It's a nice dream, but is it responsible? So I started to reason. I began to talk myself out of what my heart was burning for. I started to calculate instead of stepping into the unknown. And in the end, I didn't go. I stayed. I took the safe job. I chose what seemed logical and responsible and stable. And here's the thing, God didn't abandon me. He didn't say, all right, Amber, you missed the one shot, I'm done. That's not His heart. But looking back, I can see that this was a major fork in the road. This was one of those moments where the golden path was right in front of me, lit up, inviting me in, and I stepped aside. Because I stayed, a whole chain of events followed. At that job, in that environment, I met the man who would later become my ex husband and father of my son. My life, my emotions, my time, my energy, they all started to move into a storyline that wasn't the original Argentina storyline. Again, God still worked in it. He's kind and He brings beauty out of broken things. There were good moments, there was growth, there were lessons I truly wouldn't want to miss. But when I zoom out, I can see something very clearly. I didn't lose my calling, I lost time. And that's where Joel chapter 2, verse 25 gives me a lot of hope, where God talks about restoring the years that were eaten away, not just moments or opportunities, but years. The enemy has been very successful in distracting me away from the path for a while, but God is a God who restores years. The enemy didn't have the power to erase what God had written over my life, but he was very successful at distracting me away from it for a season. And that's the part we often underestimate. We think, well, if God really wants it, it will just happen anyway. But scripture is full of examples where people's disobedience, fear, complaining, or compromise didn't cancel God's promise, but it did delay it. The Israelites still reached the promised land. They just took 40 years to do what could have been done in a much shorter time. And if we're honest, we do that too. In my story, the fear didn't sound like fear, it sounded like wisdom. Be responsible. Think about your future. Don't throw away a good job. Who do you think you are to move across the world? You don't have the resources to do this. And it's tapped straight into the narrative of you're not ready, you don't have enough money, you don't have enough stability. In the natural, all of that sounded so reasonable, but sometimes, especially when you're walking with God, you have to trust that if He is truly leading you, He will also provide. And back then, I didn't know Him yet, so I wasn't looking at it from that perspective. But now, looking back, I can see how those reasonable arguments kept me away from a path that would have stretched and grown me in a completely different way. Sometimes the enemy doesn't show up as a roaring lion, he shows up as a reasonable advice. And he uses people who love us but themselves are afraid. And he uses our own insecurities and calls them being realistic. Argentina represented a leap of faith for me, even if I didn't have that language yet, leaving the known, stepping into the unknown, and opening myself up to a bigger life. And I chose the known, I chose the predictable, I chose the comfort zone. And the cost of that choice wasn't just a missed trip. The cost was years of my life built on a foundation that wasn't actually aligned with heaven's blueprint for me. Now, I want to pause and say this very clearly. If you're listening to this and thinking, great, I've ruined everything, I've made all wrong choices, that's not what I'm saying. God is incredibly merciful and He knows exactly where you are right now. He knows every side road, every compromise, and every fear based decision you've ever made. And He is still able to weave all of that into the story. What I'm talking about today is awareness. Awareness that your calling is not fragile, but your timeline is sensitive to your obedience. The good news is the moment you realize, wait, I've been choosing safe over surrendered, you can pivot. You don't have to wait 10 more years. You don't have to punish yourself. You just turn, you realign, you go back to the last instruction you ignored and say, Lord, I'm listening now. Show me the next step on your golden path for me. And then you trust Him with the timing of that realignment. You don't put a deadline on God. You don't say, okay, Lord, but it has to happen in the next 3 months or I'm out. You stay surrendered and let Him decide how quickly things unfold. And allow yourself to be surprised by what God brings back into your life, what He restores, things you may have forgotten about, but He didn't. For me, Argentina became this symbol, not just of a place I didn't go to, but of a version of Amber who never got the chance to be born in that season. The braver version, the stretched version, the one who would have experienced more of life, more of the world, and maybe even would have met Jesus way earlier in their story. So I want to ask you, where is your Argentina? Is there something you've been feeling drawn to for years, but you keep postponing because it just doesn't feel safe enough? Is there a conversation you know you need to have, but you keep delaying it? Is there a move, a job, a project, a ministry, a dream that you mentally visit, but you never actually step into? Maybe for you, it's not another country. Maybe it's starting that business. Maybe it's going back to school. Maybe it's serving in a way that feels way too vulnerable. And whatever it is, I want you to notice, are you choosing based on faith or based on fear dressed up as logic? Because that's where time gets stolen, not usually in one big dramatic moment, but in tiny decisions where we keep saying later to God. Later, when I have more money. Later, when I feel more confident. Later, when everyone around me approves. And later becomes 5 years, 10 years, a whole chunk of your story. The part I love about God is that He's not offended by our detours. He doesn't say, you know what, you stayed at the gym, you didn't go to Argentina, forget it, I'm done. Instead, He slowly and gently begins to invite us back. He takes even the relationship that came out of that season, my marriage, the pain, the lessons, and he uses them later as raw material for ministry, for compassion, for understanding. The enemy delays, God redeems. But here's the tension I feel in my own life right now. I don't want to keep giving the enemy free years. I don't want to keep handing over my timeline in the name of being realistic. I want to be someone who recognizes the moment when God is saying, "This is a fork in the road. Don't choose safe, choose me." And that's really what this episode is about. So I want to leave you with a simple reflection you can take into prayer, into journaling, into the next walk with God. Ask Him, "Lord, where have I traded my golden path for a safer route? Is there a decision in front of me right now where I'm letting fear or comfort speak louder than your voice? What is one brave step I can take this week to realign with your plan for my life? Not 10 steps, not a full relocation overnight, just one brave step." Because that's how we reclaim time, not by obsessing over the past, but by making a different choice in the present. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love for you to take a moment after listening and actually ask God those questions. Don't just nod along and move on to the next thing. Let Him highlight the places where time has been stolen and where He's inviting you to step back onto your golden path. In my own life, one of those areas is my love for the Spanish language. That desire I once pushed aside, God is now reigniting in such a clear way. I'm walking this out in real time, and I want to invite you to come along on this journey with me, watching how He restores what was delayed and breathes life back into the things that seemed lost. Thank you so much for being here with me today on Amidst the Chaos. If this encouraged you, you can share it with a friend who might be standing at their own Argentina moment right now. All right, we'll leave it here for today. Thanks for listening to Amidst the Chaos. I'm your host, Amber Gallion, and my prayer is that today's episode helped you see Jesus a little more clearly right in the middle of your own mess and motion. If this encouraged you, share it with someone who might need the reminder that God is building order, even when life feels anything but stable. Until next time, keep walking, keep wrestling, and keep building on the only foundation that won't move, Jesus.